All right, Joey, two things. How important it is that they kept one at least alive to give testimony about the so-called helpers, the lady that was brought in. So one part question is how important is it that they got one, and how important is it that they kept him alive for his testimony?
Sure. Well, first of all, kudos to law enforcement. They got their man. They really did. They worked long and hard. Certainly the state police in conjunction with local law enforcement agencies, federal agencies, and really the community who gave the police an awful lot of tips in terms of sightings and potential sightings and where they can be. And, it's so interesting. You always say if you see something, say something. And that doesn't only relate and apply to terrorism, of course. It applies to any act of, illegality, including an escape. And so you have to give the police credit where it's due. 3 weeks or not, they ultimately got them. And I think it ensures the community is a lot less anxious. They're sleeping a lot better tonight. And I think, it instills public confidence, certainly, when you have these people under control. Now, in terms of having one alive, as we know, the other was shot in the head the Friday preceding the capture of Sweat, and therefore that's inmate Matt. He was shot and killed on Friday, prior to them getting Sweat on Sunday. And so,
right.
It is important to have one of the inmates alive so that they can speak, but I do want to caution. And the caution is, you want to debrief this particular inmate. You want to find out what happened, how it happened, when it happened, why it happened, who it happened with, who potentially was involved, inmates, civilians, correction officers. But I don't think you want to be in a position, and the police know this, but just for the benefit, certainly of listeners, you don't want to be in a position of just accepting his word as gospel. We're talking about a murderer, a convicted killer, an inmate, and I don't know how much honor or decency there is in that. And so while it's important to find out exactly what occurred, to ask the right questions, to get the right answers, and to certainly rely upon his cooperation, and certainly it appears as though he's been talking, you want to make sure that you vet very, very clearly and very, very thoroughly exactly what he tells you. What if he has a vendetta against officers who he didn't like, against civilians he didn't like, and just wants to talk on that basis? And so that whatever he says, take with a grain of salt, and make sure that you research it very carefully and corroborate it in order to ensure that he's not telling tall tales. And so, certainly to the extent that he could give any information that they can corroborate, I think you can use that to make reforms within the system. And make no mistake about it, there will be massive reforms inside that jail. I think from bottom up, in terms of, what housing areas they keep, how often the inmates are checked on, what you allow the inmates to do, the noise levels in the facility, the amount of times actually that the inmates have to report themselves and correction officers have to check on them. The entirety of the system has been called into question, and I think reforms will be put in place so that this doesn't happen again.
Now, we heard rumors that the lady got scared and she didn't go ahead and meet them when they got out. Now, assuming she is found guilty, right now she's alleged, but assuming she is found guilty, the fact that she didn't go through with it, does that maybe possibly diminish her punishment?
It's a great question, and I think that a few things have to be looked at. Obviously, when you look at the criminal justice system, you have to look at what you do here. And what you do is you look at a threefold model. One is the punishment, and obviously you want to punish conduct like this because you don't want people helping inmates or anybody else really who's going to engage in any crime, and escaping is certainly a crime, particularly when you're that dangerous it can endanger so many people. The next thing, though, is deterrence. You want to make sure that whatever you do to Ms. Joyce, in addition to the other correction officer who has been arrested and is our co-defendant, you want to make sure that you deter not only them from doing it again, but other people who are correction officers or civilians within a jail, for them to do it again. And then, of course, the last of the three tenets would be rehabilitation. You would hope that any criminal could be rehabilitated, except for, murderers, but, certainly Joyce and Palmer, who's the correctional officer co-defendant, are not murders, and they can. So those are the three things you look at. But you want to balance that, and we know that the facilitating contraband or promoting prison contraband in the first degree is a deep felony punishable by 7 years. We also know that the criminal facilitation, which is the assisting, the aiding and abetting of the actual escape by providing the means for them to do so with the drill bits and other things, that's a misdemeanor punishable by up to 1 year. So the bottom line, though, is that you want to, at the same time, recognize, if you're the prosecutor, their cooperation. And the reason that you have to recognize that cooperation and, to some degree, allow that to be a lessening factor, a mitigating factor, something that reduces the punishment, is because you want to send a signal, not that people should ever engage in crime, they shouldn't, but that there is some type of benefit to cooperating with authorities. You want people in the future, in the event that they unfortunately commit crimes, to cooperate, to tell what they know, to aid, to assist, and to provide any information on law enforcement or to law enforcement to get matters under control. And so I think the prosecutor is going to have to look at that very carefully in assessing what punishment should be given here. Yes, the punishment should be stiff. This is not something we can tolerate, but it certainly needs to be balanced with the extent to which she did have a change of heart, she did cooperate, and she did provide information that was, relevant and important in the police capturing and subduing and bringing at least one of them into custody.